Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Phia Group webinar. Today's special edition webinar, the final rule on association health plans and you. You is all capital, not bold, just capital. We didn't italicize it. It's our take. Bottom line, folks, is how are all these rulings, how is everything in DC as it relates to association health plans? How can it benefit our self-funded clients? How can it hurt our clients, potential brokers, potential clientele? What's it going to do to our industry? Just so you all know, we literally posted this webinar, I believe, yesterday with one email. There are hundreds of you dialed in, so we appreciate the quick turnaround. We know that it's summertime, but we figured, you know what? I want to make sure we give kudos to our speakers here, which are myself, the great-looking Brady Bizzaro, and the not-so-great-looking Ron Peck. Three of us are all here, but I want to give a kudos to Brady for putting all these slides together in less than 24 hours. So all the stuff that you're going to see today is Brady's fine work, so I want to make sure we do that. So, introducing the speakers. Our Senior VP, my good friend, our General Counsel. Say hello to Ron Peck. Say hello, Ron.
Hello, Ron.
And, really, what was that?
I'm just amped. Special edition webinar.
I know, I love these special editions. So we have to say it. We would not be able to have this webinar without this fine presenter. Say hello to our Director of Healthcare, Brady Bizzaro.
Hello, Brady.
So, Brady, what's today's agenda? Let's go over it. Turn it over to you, bud.
So we'll start by looking at, just briefly, Association Health Plans 101. So this rule obviously is about association health plans. Some of you may be embarrassed to know or not know what exactly they are. So I'm going to go over that briefly so we know what we're talking about. Then I think it's helpful to go over a brief timeline of how we got to the final rule that was issued 2 days ago. From the executive order all the way to the final rule, there are some important differences, and understanding them will help you understand the actual rule itself. Speaking of the final rule, we'll talk about that next. We'll go into the the deep dive of the issue areas that are important, the formation of AHPs, the new categories, the non-discrimination protections that still exist, and when all this is supposed to happen, the implementation, of course. Then we're going to talk about the impact on self-insurance, and that'll really be sprinkled throughout the whole webinar, the impact on our industry. We'll talk about what we expect to happen next and legal challenges to the final rule, and there already have been some so far.
Already,
yes. Not surprisingly.
That's amazing. Go ahead.
So,
did you put this picture together?
I actually drew this picture last night. I did not draw it. No, I found this online. This is just an association, probably a bakery. You know, that's what you can think of, a bunch of bakeries getting together as an association. I think it does a pretty good job of explaining what they are, the 101. So, in general, these are group health plans that are focused on small employers that allows them to band together into associations, and as associations, they get certain perks, right? They have an economy of scale. They get to use their leverage to get better rates for their employees, to lower the administrative burden of having to, you have one association instead of having 40 or 50 employers together.
All right, so let's just take a step back, right?
Sure.
I just watched the movie Barbershop on a flight, so let's just pretend there's barbershops. Even this Brady's previous slide looks like potentially could be a barbershop, right?
Sure.
So, and my godfather's a barber. He has a own barbershop. So let's just pretend every example we give Brady is a 5-person barbershop. Is what it is.
Right.
And right now they have insurance either on the exchange or it's fully insured. Would it make that assumption?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, good. So again.
Yeah, so they would be able to, or what they would do is band together into an association. They'd pay their premiums through the association, and they'd get much better rates, presumably, because they have many more people pooled together. There's different types of...
So there's a barbershop association that exists, I'm assuming, right? One exists. They're already part of it.
Sure there is, yeah.
So they're part of it already?
Yes.
Okay, so that association would then be able to offer health insurance.
Correct.
Presumably self-funded.
Yeah, but it could also be fully insured, but they could do either one, right? And they would be able to get better rates for the employees in that association because of the size. Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And as an association, they also are not subject, and this is very important, of course, to many of the ACA rules, just like for large employers. So essential health benefits. They don't have to provide those in an AHP. There are certain rules that still apply, like those same rules that apply to large employers, like you have to offer coverage to children on their parents' plans till age 26. Pre-existing conditions, you can't discriminate based on that. Some of the rules apply, but there's much more flexibility. And there's many different types of AHPs, and we'll refer to them as AHPs throughout the webinar here. I've listed just 4 of the more common ones here: a professional or trade association, a captive association, what's called a professional employer organization, or a PEO, and then more importantly for our purposes here, a MIWA, a multiple employer welfare arrangement.
Which have been around for years. Regulated by states.
Yep, and we'll talk about how really not much is changing with respect to the regulation of MIWAs. Ron?
Sure. So, Brady, I know we're going to talk a little bit about how things have changed. I mean, in essence, what we're describing up until this point is sort of what the status was.
Yep.
To Adam's example, you've got a barber shop there in, pick a state, Massachusetts? Okay, Massachusetts. I'm not getting very creative today. And so they're part of an association health plan with other barber shops in Massachusetts. And one of the different types of plan structures or association health plan structures that Brady just mentioned, okay, that's already up and running. What you can see here, and I know Brady's going to talk a little bit about the history of what has happened since, there was an idea to, in essence, expand the ability to form these association health plans above and beyond the current status. That being, let's say, again, I'm a barber shop in Massachusetts. I want to be part of an association health plan with barber shops in Connecticut, in New York, in New Jersey. I don't know why you would, but, hey, friends in New Jersey. Moral of the story is, because we're still part of the same sort of business model or association, we can form it across state lines. Additionally, let's say across from the barber shop in Massachusetts, there's a bakery or there is a bookseller. Now, again, because we're in the same metro geographic area, even though we're not part of the same business model, we can still form an association health plan there too. So all these different ways now for different businesses to form association health plans that they couldn't before.
Sure. And as we go on here, I just want to keep in mind, guys, that this rule just came out 2 days ago. I have it right in front of me. It's 198 pages. I've not read the whole thing, I'll be honest.
Why not?
Adam, I've read most of it.
What do you mean to say? He hasn't read the whole thing 3 times.
He's read it.
But it's worth noting that there are also, after these kinds of rules come out, the DOL is going to certainly issue guidance. So I see we have a bunch of questions coming in already, and we'll try to answer some of them. But just know that
bottom line is we're not going to be able to answer all the questions, but we will have a podcast on this in the next few days.
We will. And when additional guidance comes out, we'll be sure to update you guys with that as well. But as far as the timeline, to explain, like Ron said, how this sort of came about, this was about expanding the use of AHPs because they're seen as a way, mostly by conservatives and Republicans, to allow small businesses to, again, offer their employees cheaper health insurance rates, because currently they'd have to be shopping on the ACA exchange, and as we know, that's very, very expensive, and they didn't enjoy the benefits of large group insurance. So October of last year, we had the executive order signed where President Trump asked federal agencies to find ways to expand AHPs. That would, as I mentioned, allow more of them to get together across state lines, like large corporations currently do. And we talked about the theories as why that would be. This is also a big proponent of this, of expanding AHPs with Senator Rand Paul, who's a libertarian, and this is an idea that he's been pushing for as well. And so this started with the executive order and continued on to, we got a graphic that was left over, it looks like, from before. That turned into a proposed rule. A notice of proposed rulemaking was issued in January of 2018. And in that proposed rule, basically, they outlined some of the contours of how they would be permitted to expand AHPs. So they'd be considered a large single group for insurance purposes as long as certain conditions were met. So in the proposed rule, you had to have members in the same trade or industry, or, and the key word there is or, members in the same state or same geographic metro area within a state. So
at this point, again, this is Ron Peck. I could tell you that SILA, which is Self-Insurance Institute of America, particularly the Government Relations Committee, they started looking at this, the proposed rule, and they were looking at it from the perspective of the self-funded or self-insurance interest. And one of the big concerns at the time was, okay, let's say hypothetically the proposed rule is passed, and now that's expanded use. The question then becomes what laws are going to apply? Because like Brady said before, you're talking about potentially MIWAs, that MIWA insurance is going to apply, et cetera. So the MIWA laws, as you know, are state laws. So the big question then became, if you form an association health plan, this expanded use of association health plans is ultimately passed per the proposed rule. Which MIWA laws are going to apply? Do you get to pick and choose which state? So again, I have member groups from multiple different states. Do I get to pick which state I want to follow? Or 2, do I have to comply with all of those states? In essence, every single issue that comes up, I have to examine the MIWA laws of each individual state on a per-issue basis to determine whose law is the most restrictive, the most conservative, the toughest to obey, and have to obey that on a case-by-case basis. Or 3, and this was the best-case scenario, and I know it's something that SIA, as you can see before you, was fighting for, was to try and get the same kind of flavor of federal preemption that your traditional self-funded plan gets to enjoy under ERISA. And I know we're going to talk a little bit later about ultimately what the final rule determined, but again, these were the arguments and the issues that they were looking into and advocating on your behalf during the proposed rule-making period.
One of the most important parts of the proposed rule, by the way, was that it would have allowed groups to get together in an association just for the sole purpose of offering health insurance. That concerned a lot of people, actually, including in our own industry, because there's concerns here about potential fraud and abuse. You could have people, loosely associated, some, huckster or people looking to, steal money by steal premiums. That's actually one of the main fears here. So that actually didn't make it into the final rule, and we'll talk about why that didn't happen when we get to the final rule. So that was issued, as we mentioned, 2 days ago. It doesn't differ much from the proposed rule, except in some important key ways we'll talk about. But the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, estimates that about 4 million Americans will join in AHP by 2023. So that's only in 5 years, and that's also worrying many people who are supporters of the ACA, because the fear there is that it will attract away young, healthy individuals from those fully insured markets, from the ACA exchanges, and all you'll have left will be the sicker, older people. And that would obviously cause rates to rise and would really lead to undermining the ACA itself. But as you mentioned before, this implementation of the AHP final rule is staggered. It's not all happening overnight. So we'll take a little bit more of a deep dive. I put here a picture of just what the rule looks like. If you want to find it on the DOL website, it's just a giant PDF of text. There's no fancy graphics like we have. So be prepared for a kind of a boring read there. Okay, formation. Under the proposal, as I mentioned, you could have established an AHP just for offering health coverage. Now you can't. You have to have a bona fide group sponsoring an AHP must have a substantial business purpose unrelated to the provision of health care benefits. Now,
all right, so let's go back to our barbershop.
Right.
So that would be a bona fide group. We're getting together because we want to focus on, the health benefits of keeping your barbershop clean, right? Sanitation, as an example. So that's our purpose.
Yeah.
So our purpose, the main purpose of our association of barbershops is for the betterment of barbershops, cleanliness, sanitation, how to keep customers, et cetera, not healthcare.
Exactly, yeah. And so what
you would need.
Is what you need, yes. And the rule makes it it's pretty loosely defined here. What a substantial business purpose is loosely defined. It can include things like if a bunch of you employers like to get together and offer, educational classes on a certain topic that are related to the group's members, that could be enough. So again, it's not like you have to be in the same exact industry. You could care about the same kinds of things and be in unrelated ones.
So no difference in our industry, right? So use the barbershop. It could be scissor manufacturers.
Correct. Yep.
Brushes. Different companies that make brushes. Different companies that make the talcum powder they put on your neck, whatever it might be. All those organizations could also be part of this same association.
Yeah.
Therefore, create an association health plan.
Yep. So that's really what the rule sort of split the difference there by, there's some requirement, but it's pretty loosely defined. I think that was actually pretty smart.
So let's say SIA.
Right.
So SIA itself, if we were all small little companies, all the different members were preserving the interests of self-insurance.
Sure.
Different vendors, TPA, stop-loss carriers, the brokers, all of us could be together, pooled
into SIA AHP. Yeah.
SIA AHP.
Yeah, might be an idea you pitch to them, so you could see. But a little more detail on the kinds of categories that this rule created of AHPs. We'll go through them. They're even described in more detail in the actual rule itself. But first category here are association health plans that already satisfy the existing rules. So these are existing and newly formed employer groups. They may establish a fully insured large group or self-insured AHP by qualifying as a bona fide group, but, and here are the conditions that already exist, they must be in the same industry, trade, or profession, and be located in the same geographic location.
What does that mean?
It means they have to be in the same area, the same state. They have to be...
Is it state? It says geographical location.
It's state. There's a definition as well about metropolitan area, which
we've had a couple
questions about that. So there's not an actual definition that is sufficient for my purpose.
This will be follow up in regards to.
This
will be flushed out.
That's where you'll see the regulations. Exactly. Yes, you'll have some guidance issued about what exactly that means. Know here that you can include working owners, so self-employed people are not going to be able to be considered in.
All right. So if I have a barbershop where I'm a self-employed barbershop, it's just me.
Right.
I'm not part of this.
Not in category 1, no.
I'd have to have. What if I have Ron working on the second chair?
Then you probably could fit in category 1, but you're probably likely to fit better into category 2, which we're getting to next.
Got it. So real quick on geographical area. Sorry for this, but that's why I'm here, right?
Right.
So to me, it seems like, and again, we're in a little state. I never forget, every time I go to Texas, there's always like this map of all the states that can fit in Texas, right? There's like 40 states that can fit within one state.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say, like, it should be allowed for me to be in the same barbershop association as those from New Hampshire? Because if you're in Texas, one side of Dallas to the other is the same amount of distance, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's why they have to figure that out.
Yeah, and if you consider, like, for example, the D.C. metropolitan area is going to include Maryland and Virginia. So we have a comment here, this can include multiple states. Yes, it can. It just depends on how they exactly define each. I'm sure they may even draw on the map.
Let's not get too far in the weeds right now.
Sure. Okay, so on to category 2, we'll talk about the AHPs that satisfy the new regulations that are in this final rule. So the conditions here, you must be in the same industry or profession, but not limited by geography, which is important, or you can be unrelated but confined to the same state or metro area. So we mentioned before, the barber shop, right, which is quote-unquote unrelated to the scissor manufacturer, but is related enough, has enough of a purpose to be considered to, a bona fide group which can sponsor an AHP. Or you could be in the same industry and in different states. So category 2 is really the expansion part.
Right.
This is where you're going to see more employers banding together.
This is where we have the opportunity. That's why people are listening in.
Correct. And this also can include working owners. So you're talking about independent contractors, you're talking about people who are self-employed. They'll be able to get into category 2.
Okay.
Category 3 is pretty rare, but I'll just mention it briefly here, is if you don't fit into 1 or 2, then you could be subject to the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services look-through rule, which is essentially a requirement where insurance carriers have to impose ACA rules based on the underlying size of the AHP member. Very, very particular there. And if you're self-insured AHP in category 3, you can be regulated by states and their benefit mandates will apply to you. So we don't expect many people to be joining in category 3.
The bottom line is, again, everyone has time is of the essence, right?
Sure.
If you're someone on this call, your focus is on category 2.
Most likely, yeah. If you're looking to form a new one, you're looking at category 2.
Right, because the category 1s, you could have been doing this prior to this rule.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
All right. So some of the non-discrimination protections we can talk about here. It's important to note that the rule notice that HIPAA does apply to these AHPs. You still cannot discriminate based on eligibility, benefits, or premiums by taking into account health factors of an employee. Can't do that. This only applies, or rather the prohibition on discriminating based on health claims experience only applies to category 2 AHPs.
So bottom line on this one, right? If I have a plan, so this is where self-funding might not work, right? Where you get stop loss from. If you don't have any claims experience at all, it's fully insured. There is no health claim experience. You don't have the data. So you're basically taking a whim. You're bringing in 100 different barbershops together. You can't discriminate. You can't say, all right, this barbershop, this guy looks unhealthy. I'm going to charge you a different rate than this other guy.
Right, or this guy has a condition or something. Right.
You know about.
Not
right.
able to do that.
Right. So you're just pooling them all together.
Yep.
One rate.
Yep.
Got it.
It's important to know what you can vary premiums based on, though, and that is what's called a bona fide employment-based classification. So whether you have your example used before, truckers versus yoga instructors,
right?
You can take that into account. You can take full-time versus part-time into account. Union versus non-union, where they're located, what kind of occupation, length of service. These are things you can consider when you're varying premiums or setting premium rates.
Good.
And also importantly, varying rates based on age or gender is permitted. So that's controversial, but it is permitted, worth noting.
Right. Well, that's what they do for life insurance.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
Staggered implementation. We'll talk about when this is all going to happen. So the rule says that 60 days after the rule is published in the Federal Register, that this will all go into effect, and then these dates also apply. So all new or existing AHPs may establish a fully insured AHP on September 1st, 2018. Existing ones that sponsor an AHP on or before that date have to wait till January 1st. All other associations may establish a self-funded AHP on April 1st, 2019. Also worth noting, and I'll mention this when we get to the legal challenges, but we don't expect there to be an injunction issued here, but that's really the only thing that could stop these rules at this point, because it have to be issued within 60 days. We don't see that happening, so for all practical purposes, we expect that the final rule will be going into effect, and then the staggered dates will apply after that.
This slide right here, let's go to the next one. Sorry, I told you.
Sure.
This is probably the most important slide.
Yeah.
This is where this is where we put some meat on the bones, right?
Right. Sure.
So in regards to how this will impact self-insurance, let's turn it back over to Ron.
Sure. So I had mentioned previously that SILA, particularly the Government Relations Committee, they were looking at which MIWA laws or how were the MIWA laws going to be applied to these association health plans. And I already mentioned, guys, that there were basically three possibilities. Either one, they were going to pick one state and apply that state's MIWA laws. Basically, if I'm an association health plan, I have member groups in multiple different states, I get to pick one of those states and just apply their laws across the board. How you pick that state, whatever, we don't have to get into that. But think one example someone gave was the essential health benefits, how you get to pick a state and then apply their rules. The second possibility, which would have been the best possibility, was a federal preemption, sort of similar to your traditional ERISA preemption, self-funded benefit plan. The worst possibility was that you were going to have to comply with every single state's law where you have a member group. Unfortunately, that's what happened.
Right. So if we went back to Category 1, MIWA, state law applies. You have to deal with the state MIWA laws, whatever they are. This new Category 2 creates a new potential group of associations, a potential new group of self-funded employers, but they're also still now subject to state law.
And I would say it's actually worse than even Category 1 as a result, because basically, look at it this way. If I'm an association health plan in Kansas, right, and I have multiple groups in Kansas, I know I'm applying Kansas state law. Now the problem is, if I have groups in California, Kansas,
a barbershop.
Sure.
I have a barbershop, and I'm adding, it's a national association.
Sure. So now the problem is, let's say an issue comes up relating to how the plan is structured, okay? You have to look at the state laws for every single state where you have a group.
So if I was part of the National Association of Barbershops, and we have plans and membership, we have membership in all 50 states, my self-funded plan would be subject to each individual state's MIWA law.
And you have to find the one that's most restrictive on that particular issue. And maybe in this case, it's New York. Wow. Now, another issue comes up. You have to look.
Should everyone just hang up then?
Yeah, right. Now,
how would we tell people?
Think of this. So now you're thinking, okay, New York,
Don't do it. Don't hang up.
Does that mean I apply New York law all the time? No, because now another issue comes up. You have to now look at every state's law on that new issue and obey the most difficult one. So it's literally an issue-by-issue assessment of every state's law, which is going to be hugely difficult.
Brady, don't you want to give us some good news?
All right, so if you...
Ron is the bear of bad news. I know you probably wanted to say the good news, the but.
Oh, no, I have actually more bad news.
All right, that's somebody wants to hear it. But Brady, I think there is some, right, that page 96?
Yeah, so there's something here where I think this informs us that this is probably not the final word on AHPs. On page 96, there's a quote here where the DOL mentions here that a potential future mechanism for preempting state insurance laws that go too far in regulating self-insured AHPs. They seem to be agreeing that these state insurance laws do go too far. And
too much regulation.
Saying there's potential there for a mechanism to fix this, which would be the class exemption they didn't provide.
And one of the issues people have been talking about, and we're even getting comments, hey, I heard this is not feasible in California. One of the things people have talked about is that these state regulators who are actually opposed to association health plans, they're afraid that these are going to siphon even more healthy lives off of the exchange and harm Obamacare, that they're actually going to make their MIWA laws even more difficult to comply with as a result of this, basically sabotaging any association health plan that has any member groups in that state, which is why some people here are saying, hey, I've heard you can't have association health plan with groups in California. It's because California's obviously got difficult laws to comply with and are probably going to make them even more difficult. Another person commented on Massachusetts, same thing. And you look at it this way. If I have, Adam, you mentioned barbershops. Let's say I have 50 barbershops in New Hampshire and the laws are very favorable there. If one barbershop from Massachusetts joins the party, he's the Debbie Downer. He brings Massachusetts law with him, knocks the whole thing out.
Don't let him in. Don't let him in. So
that's a lot of actually
real quick. A lot of people are asking. Sure. We will make all the slides available. The audio will be available. All of it's going to be on our website by 3 o'clock today.
You can't keep
3 o'clock Eastern, all this will be available on our website. So please stop asking us if it will be available. It will in about 90 minutes. Brady.
Thanks, Adam. So I want to mention quickly that California actually has a law that prohibits self-insured MIWA. So there's a grandfather clause, though, just to answer that one comment quickly. What do we expect to see next? What do we think is going to happen in the future? We think we're going to see a continued push by our industry for a class exemption for self-insured AHPs. So again, this is because of ERISA preemption. We need a class exemption for self-insured association health plans to allow for preemption. Until we have that, we'll have the kind of bad result that Ron described. We expect definitely to see more pushback from Democrats who believe that AHPs are siphoning off, like Ron mentioned, the young, the healthy, into AHPs and leaving behind the older and the sicker people in individual markets. The market impact, by the way, according to Avalier Health, you should see premiums in those markets rise by almost 4%, and small group ACA premiums rise by almost 1%. So that could be a big deal, given how much of the premiums are already rising on their own.
So this is what they're thinking. They think 4 million Americans will join association health plans. So there is some opportunity for our payer clients out there, our administrator clients out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. These are people who have middle class jobs and make $40,000-$70,000 a year or something. They don't qualify for subsidies. They're in the individual market. They're getting slammed. They're looking for ways to band together, and this will give them a way to do that.
All right.
Also, states will face pressure to moderate their MIWA laws, but I think, like Ron said, they probably won't. They'll probably, in some cases, make them even more difficult.
It depends on what state you're in, right?
Exactly.
And who the political class is that runs that state.
Right. Speaking of states, I want to mention 2 legal challenges. Look at those fancy graphics we have there of New York.
For those of you who don't know, I know everyone in Texas knows what your state flag looks like. Very few people in Massachusetts realize that emblem, that is on our state flag.
Sure is.
Correct?
Yes,
that
sir.
is the Native American guy there on the left.
So what we had here is it's important to note that 17 attorneys general wrote to the DOL opposing these rules before they became final. There is a legitimate concern I mentioned before about fraud and abuse here. Who's actually getting together? Who's sponsoring these AHPs? Is it some guy in a back alley who's taking the premium money and running away? That's a real concern. So there's something there. Also, they're concerned about what they claim to be skimpy insurance coverage, minimal coverage. And so the 2 attorney generals from Massachusetts and New York took the next step here and have announced that they will sue the Trump administration over the expansion of these AHPs. And
so these are both states. I mean, it's funny. Go back one slide.
Sure.
So if everyone knows, we recently, Boston, right, as we talked about, Amazon, we're the headquarters.
They're coming
right?
to town.
They're all coming to town, right? This new potential for the future of healthcare is coming to Boston, where we literally are doing everything possible to not reduce the overall cost of healthcare.
Yeah, that's what that actually the logo, the Latin, it means we crush innovation. That's what it means in Latin.
Very nice. Very nice.
So just to quickly mention here, what I think the meat of the lawsuit will be is this rule actually redefines the word employer as that term is used in ERISA. And it includes associations and working owners in a way that they will argue is inconsistent with what ERISA actually requires. And again, that will have to be filed in federal court, and they'll have to see if it's an injunction. I don't think we'll have one in 60 days, so I think the rules will go into effect.
I love this. It will invite fraud, mismanagement, and deception.
Right.
Have they seen the type of claims that Medicare and Medicaid pay for right now, currently?
Probably not.
Clearly have no actual clue about what we do. We're trying to identify fraud, reduce the overall fraud. That's what self-funded plans get to do that you're not seeing in the fully insured world.
For what it's worth, these attorney generals have about 10 other pending lawsuits against the administration. These things take a long time, so I don't think they're actually going to happen in time. And to answer a quick comment, someone's asking here whose states' rates are used or whose state laws would apply with an association across state lines. I believe the answer to that is that it's the state where the largest employer of the association resides. I can double-check that, though. But again,
we will have a podcast on the questions. What Matt Payton, our client account manager here, is going to do, and our social media guru, he will put all these questions together. We had a short 30-minute webinar. For obvious time's sake, we just put this in place in 24 hours. We will have a podcast on this within the next 48 hours. It'll be available on our website as well as on, Podomatic and iTunes and so forth. So our next webinar is going to be July 12, 2018. I'm sure that topic will end up changing. We have no idea. Please tune in. On behalf of Ron Peck, Brady Bizzarro, again, kudos, Brady, for putting all this together. We appreciate it. I think our industry appreciates it too. And myself, Adam Russo, thank you for joining us today here at the Phia Group. Have a great day.